Well, here we are again. It's always such a pleasure. Remember when I hand-swapped a Subaru? As you may remember from the previous video, you did watch the previous video, right? I swapped a Handis K24 into my 2000 Subaru Impreza Coupe. This frame hadn't been on the road for like 7 years, and I used a concerning number of cheapo eBay parts, so the chances of this going well for an extended period of time are pretty slim. Or are they? I've been driving the K-Swap Subaru for a hot minute now, and it's just about time for its first oil change. And before you say it, I know it's a Honda engine, and they leak so much that they practically change their own oil, but it's the principle of the matter. I figure this is probably a good time to check in and update you all on how it's been running. A lesser man would drag this out for as long as possible, but not me. So here's the short version. It's been fine. And that's it. The rest of this video is just going to be me talking about some small issues I had, some changes I made, and how all them eBay parts are holding up. So if you're into that, there's timestamps in the thingy to each section for your viewing pleasure. Let's start out with the basics. I've put around 4,000 miles on this car since I built it. I'd like to say that I daily it, but that's not quite accurate. I, personally, don't daily drive. Work is so close to home that I just walk. That being said, I try to drive the car as much as possible. And that's just because it's cheaper to drive. I mean, yeah, I also drive it because it's cool and fun to drive and all, but it literally gets better mileage than my 05 WRX, so the choice ain't hard to make. The only times I don't drive this car is when it's raining or when I'm going into a city. You might think I don't drive it in the rain because I'm afraid of hurting the engine that's sticking out of the hood, but it's actually because I'm afraid that my shitty wrap job is going to come peeling off even more than it already is. I'm still overall happy with the wrap, but my skills are certainly lacking, so if some of the areas got wet, they'd probably start to peel. Some already have. The engine getting wet is whatever, it'll be fine. As for not driving in cities, well, people are naturally attracted to this car. Historically, I've built and driven cars that pretty well fly under the radar, but can you believe it? This one just happens to turn heads. Who could guess why? Anytime I go out, at a minimum, people are always staring. It doesn't matter if they're a car enthusiast or not. At stoplights, people will roll down their windows and ask me what's going on under the hood, as if they couldn't just look and see. At auto parts stores, people will come up and ask a bunch of questions, which is fun, honestly. On the highway, people will always try to race me. Rest in peace, Mustang owners. All of this I'm actually fine with. It's fun to share my hobby with others and hear what they have to say. I really quite enjoy that. What's less desirable is when law enforcement starts getting curious. I just want to make something clear. This car is, as far as I can tell, 100% legal. I voluntarily sought the police out, showed them the car, and asked them, would you write me a ticket for driving this? To which they replied with, oh yeah, we know about you. We've seen this around. How did you even get that engine in there? Is it still all-wheel drive? Then they looked it over and were just like, yeah, I mean, it's got a hood, it's got tags, looks good to me. So it's all good, right? Not exactly. I have had one officer roll his window down and be like, is that legal? And I was just like, yeah, I checked it out. It's all good. Also, totally legal to do 20 over on the highways. So write that down while you're at it. So, to get around this issue, I tend to avoid cities and such, which really hasn't been that big of a deal. I'm also afraid of leaving it in parking lots because someone could very easily steal my extremely expensive injectors. Yeah, I could make a cowl for it, but I've been putting it off because, who am I kidding, driving it like this is a great part of the experience. Here's a fun little fact. I have never driven a car that has a K-Series, at least not until I built this. Just thought you might find that interesting. All right, let's get on to the good stuff. Overall, this has been pretty reliable. Never left me stranded. Which is a good thing because up until yesterday, I've been raw dogging it without any sort of roadside assistance membership. Reliability-wise, the only major issue I've had is that it would sometimes get hot at low speeds and start overheating. Give me a second, I'm having a flashback to the Taco Bell drive-thru. My Subaru instinct kicked in and I instantly started looking for head gasket leak symptoms, but then I snapped out of it and realized that the issue was due to there being a sizable air bubble inside the cooling system. I added a spot to bleed the system, changed up the fan situation just to be safe. Haven't had any issues since. I also had an oil leak where I boogered the turbo oil return onto the pan. The thing would just piss oil all over the exhaust, so when you'd come to a stop, you'd just see smoke rising through the engine clearance zone, which didn't do much to help me keep a low profile. Slathered some RTV on there and left that for future me to deal with. A lot of you have been asking about this, so here is how I did the engine mounts. They're just some square tube welded to angle iron that puts all the weight of the engine onto the frame rails. I welded some captive nuts into the rails and boogered up some plates to bolt the assembly to the engine. This is one of the things that I thought would give me trouble. Having that much angular load on the bolts into the block was questionable at best. Gotta make sure that it's strong. Feels strong. It's like every bump, right? Oh, yeah, that's pretty strong, I think. But overall, they've been fine. In fact, because the mounts are so long, I don't really get much vibration despite the engine being solid mounted. As mentioned in the previous video, I used an adapter plate to mate the Handis engine to the Subaru Trans. It's been fine, however, I did have some trouble early on before the build was complete. The kit essentially comes with an adapter plate and a flywheel. The flywheel, however, had a design flaw. The bolt circle that bolts the flywheel to the crank has a lip around the bolt holes. That lip was too close to the bolt holes. When you'd pop the bolts into the holes, they'd go in, however, you couldn't get the socket onto the heads because the lip was too dang close to the bolt head. When I first built the car, I just tightened them on as best as I could, and rather predictably, the bolts eventually worked themselves loose and the flywheel started shaking around in there. Dropped the Trans, brought the flywheel to a machine shop where my buddy works, and he turned that bolt circle out so I could fit a socket on the bolt head properly. It's been fine ever since. Power-wise, I was running out of injector at high RPM and high boost. This thing's only on spring pressure, which is somewhere between 12 and 14 PSI, but we're running on corn juice. I had 1200 cc's in there, which were not enough for those kinds of RPMs. I did the usual last-ditch steps. I increased the fuel pressure, adjusted the tune, whatever. It didn't work. It wasn't enough. So I called the injector manufacturer and was like, hey, so funny story, I'm shit at math and need bigger injectors despite just ordering these from you like 2 weeks ago. Can we work something out? And yeah, we worked something out. And now she's got 2150s in there and the 1200s found a new home. I have no idea how much power the car is making. I haven't dyno tuned it yet because I'm having a hard time finding a shop that will let me tune my car on their dyno. As you probably know by now, I try to do all the work on my project cars myself. Not that I think I could do better than them. I know for a fact that I'd get better results if a pro tuner did the tuning, but for me, it's not about that. My favorite part about working on cars is doing the work myself, top to bottom, except bodywork. Fucking hate bodywork. The engine's been fine. Like, it's a Handis engine, of course it's fine. Like, why are we even talking? The stock Subaru 5-speed is really not happy. It hasn't been since I first started the thing up. The first gear synchro has straight up left the building, so you got to do the old bump second, smash first, and not grind it in. This transmission is just really tired. I haven't swapped to a 6-speed setup yet because I got distracted by another project, but more on that later. For now, let's talk eBay parts. The intake manifold has been alright. It required a bit of clearancing near the weird Handis coolant area thingy, but otherwise it's been fine. Predictably, the 3D printed resin throttle body adapter cracked from heat stress and caused a wee little vacuum leak and the world's loudest whistling sound. But I had expected this, so I already had an aluminum one on deck that a buddy and I cast based on that 3D printed part.
Oh, that looks fucking
That looks as good as, oh wow, that's impressive. And in case that one breaks too, I already have a real CNC machined one ready. I'm 10 steps ahead of you. The fuel rail is fine, no leaks or anything. The fuel pressure regulator, however, does have one minor problem in that it doesn't regulate fuel pressure. At least, not in a one-to-one way. Your normal fuel pressure regulator is map referenced, 1-to-1. But this thing don't play by those rules. It's all over the place, and it's not even consistent about it either. Now, this isn't really a big deal for me because I wired a fuel pressure sensor into my standalone ECU. So the ECU just reads the fuel pressure and calculates the proper injector pulse regardless of pressure. And with those 2150s, I ain't running out of fuel anytime soon. If I were to bet on anything stranding me, it would be the fuel pressure regulator. I should probably put a spare one of those in the glove box just in case. The exhaust manifold is fine, no cracks or anything. I did have some exhaust studs break off, but that was probably due to me having a lot of the exhaust system weighing on the manifold, so I ended up adding another hanger to help with that. The turbo is fine, no issues thus far, not even with my lazy elbow setup to make it face forward. The blow-off valve, wastegate, air-water intercooler, and exchanger, all fine. Intake temps are great, no compressor surge, no overboosting, feels good. I did blow the charge piping off a few times, but I think that has more to do with the shitty clamps than anything else. I used a Prius electric water pump for the air-water intercooler, and that also has been chugging along happily. And finally, the alternator tensioner is fine. I know many of you were concerned. Okay, there was one instance where one of these bolts started working its way out, so I just grabbed longer ones and ran them home. It's been good ever since, though. The frame has given me a small amount of trouble. A trans mount that was previously stripped finally came loose, and I had to use a thread repair kit to fix it. I never even changed the brakes, even after it sat for so long. Those, surprisingly, have also been fine, but the pedal is pretty squishy. These lines tend to get soft after a long time, so it's probably wise to slap some stainless steel braided ones on there. I should probably just do a whole brake system upgrade at some point. Oh, and I also added this sticker to answer the question that I get most frequently.
Saves you from a lot of questions, huh? I was literally about to ask and I turned and I read it.
And that's really about it. Keep in mind, this is all over a span of 4,000 miles or so. If you're a Subaru guy, that probably sounds like a long time to go without issues, but for the rest of us, that's still pretty fresh. Also, I don't drive this car particularly hard. It's fine for me, but I'd be less optimistic about it if it were in like a rally or something. All right, let's finish this off. This car is still a joy to drive, and I do so quite often. It's hilariously good on fuel and quick as hell. I'd say this project is about 70% done, which, given my track history, means I'm probably not going to do any more serious work to it anytime soon, so let's just round that up to 100. Besides, I've already started and nearly finished another project, so I haven't been working on this one as much, but I'm sure you'll be seeing more stuff about that here soon. Until then, bye for now.